Every year at Watches and Wonders, a few watches steal the spotlight. The headline pieces, the ones everyone agrees are the best. The most complicated, the most innovative, the ones that dominate the conversation for weeks after the show wraps, it seems like. So I covered those pieces in my podcast last week where I talked about the releases that really matter. But today, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about the watches that didn't quite land in that top tier. Not my absolute favorites or the most groundbreaking releases of 2026, but the ones that I kept coming back to. Because even if they didn't redefine anything, they did get something right. And as collectors, those are often the details that matter the most. So this episode of the podcast is going to be all about those watches. The ones that sit just outside that spotlight, but still deserve a closer look. So let's get into it. Now, my name is James. I'm a watch collector, a watch enthusiast, and a watch advisor. And I'm really all about you knowing and loving your watches. So that's the goal for the show. Now, if you like this type of content, please do like the podcast, subscribe to my channel, because you will see new videos every single week. There's way more in the description below, so check that out. Today, I am wearing my Grand Seiko SLGA017 Skyflake dial, Evolution 9 designed, blued crystal, the blued fired second hand. I love this watch. It continues to be both a sport and a dress piece for me. Now, let's jump into these watches. And the first one is one that I kind of alluded to last time, but like I say, I didn't really think that it broke the mold in any way. It's kind of like a reinvention of something that they've already done, and that is the Vacheron Constantin overseas dual time Cardinal Points watches. Now, they've already done an Everest overseas that they did several years ago. It was in titanium. It was a limited edition. They did a dual time watch, and then they did a chronograph version, I believe, and they were nice. I mean, it was a kind of a gray and orange color scheme, so a nice contrast to it. But in terms of technical excellence, there wasn't anything that was really new. It was just a little bit of a redefinition. They changed the case material, make it more durable, which makes sense. It's meant to be like an outdoorsy Everest-themed watch, right? And then they had kind of a unique engraving on the rotor, if I recall, of something with the Everest kind of thematic or nomenclature there. So that was something they've already done. And now in 2026, they introduced these Cardinal Points models. And there are 4 colors. There's a blue, there's a white, brown, and then there's a green. So you have some different options here in terms of color. Again, they do add a nice bit of contrast because they also have these little tiny pops of orange on the strap, on the dial, in terms of the GMT hand, the AM/PM indicator hand. So they did add some nice little features that look a little bit different. The texture of the dial is a little bit different. So it's interesting, and I do like it. So that's kind of where, again, we're going with this conversation is I really do like these pieces. They're just not new. It's just kind of like they did something a little different, not breaking the mold, but we're just exploring here a little bit. And so these watches, if you're interested in them, they are pretty nice. It's a 41 millimeter titanium case, 12 millimeters thick on these. So again, a pretty wearable watch, pretty close to the standard overseas. They do have that same 5110 dual time movement. So again, there's no chronograph version this time around. It's just the dual time, which is nice. It's got the AM/PM indicator. I like the way that they have broken out the functionality of the 2 time zones with this watch. So it is automatic, self-winding watch with a 60-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate, 150 meters of water resistance, which again is helpful if you're doing outdoors type of activities with this. The price is a little bit steep at about $41,000 US. So again, you got to be ready for an even more premium buy than a standard overseas. So as long as you're okay with that, then this could be the piece for you. If you are already kind of blown out of the water by the standard pricing on the overseas, then obviously this one may not be for you. But I do like what they're doing here, just some neat little reinterpretations of these watches. I do love the overseas collection personally. I mean, I think it's one of the best modern sports watches out there where you still get a lot of really high finishing. You get a Geneva seal watch, both the case and the movement. which is pretty impressive. And so in this case, making it in titanium, making it a little more durable, I like what they've done with this, and the fact that they have some different color schemes also is nice. Obviously, I like the blue the best. The white looks very, very clean. I appreciate that. The brown is, again, it's a very tasteful brown. They've done some browns before with like the old generation of the Overseas Ultra Thin. So this is a new kind of interpretation of that. And then the green, they've obviously done some things with green in recent times, coming out with their rose gold and green dial Overseas couple of models. So no stranger to those color schemes. But again, this was a nice release. Nothing brand new, but you get a good solid watch from Vacheron, and I always appreciate what they're doing with their stuff. So that's one that is worth taking a look at. Now let's move on to the next piece we're going to talk about today, and that's going to be the Chopard Alpine Eagle 41. And this new one here is in kind of a light blue color. They also had a few different color schemes, which we'll look at. So you had a couple of stainless steel models, one in this blue color. You had a light green, almost like a mint green looking color. You had kind of like a beige style dial, and then you also had a rose gold watch with a brown dial. So I do love that combo, but when I think of Alpine Eagle, I don't think high luxury type of a sports watch. So the rose gold seems a little out of character here for me personally, but obviously well made, great watch. I can't argue with the fact that they went and made a precious metal version of this. When we're looking at the actual watch itself, it is an interesting couple of features. So they have this lucent steel case in 41 millimeters, and lucent steel, basically what they did is it's a proprietary alloy with high recycled content, 75 to 80% recycled content, which is kind of interesting, and it's actually harder than conventional steel. So your typical 316L would be about 150 Vickers or so in terms of hardness. Here you're getting something that's around 200 Vickers. So it is a harder steel, and the watch itself is very thin. It's just under 10 millimeters thick. So JLC that I talked about last week, they introduced a watch that's kind of similar, a little smaller profile here, but the advantage that Chopard has, and I have to give credit where credit is due, is this is a full-on sports watch because of the caliber that's in it. So this movement in the Chopard Alpine Eagle is a 01.01 COSC certified movement, so pretty good tolerances on the timing. It is also automatic, has a 60-hour power reserve at 4 hertz, and it is 100 meters of water resistance. So when I think about a watch that you can do it all with, that still can play that dressier part in the collection, I do really like the Alpine Eagle. I've not gotten to get hands-on with one of these. I would love to actually get to see one and check out the bracelet. From what I have seen, what I've read, the bracelet is very, very tight in terms of the tolerances. So there's no play in the bracelet. So I do think it's very solid from everything that I know about it, and I would love to get more hands-on with something like this, because for the price point, you're talking about $19K. Again, still a little bit more expensive than some other integrated bracelet watches, but given that everything you get with it, I do think it's actually a pretty decent value here. You have this kind of snailing on the dial, this dial texture that they've used in their Alpine Eagle series. I do think it's interesting, and normally you'd see something on the movement side, but they do it on the dial. So definitely a unique look. You're not going to mistake this for a different type of integrated steel sports watch. So I do like what Chopard is doing here. And again, with the different colors, you have some options. Pretty fair price point. I think on secondary, you probably would find these for even less, so you'd get a better value out of it. So that would probably be the way that I would go here. They've done some darker blue dials. They've done some lighter blue dials. Of course, if you all know me, you know that I love blue dials. And there is also a date on here, so that's pretty great because not all of these types of watches have that complication. So I like that they added a date as well. Now, we're going to stick on Chopard for a second because there's another watch that I saw from them that I also wanted to touch on in this episode, and that is the L.U.C Quattro Spirit 25 Straw Marquetry Edition. Now, when you think of straw marquetry, usually you think of some sort of elegant decoration, And in this case, that is actually what they have done on this watch. Now, it's kind of wild, so I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's a 40 millimeter case in what they call ethical yellow gold. So Chopard takes a big pride in where they source their materials, all those types of things. That's become a big focus on what they're about. And so that's what they call this. It's ethical gold. Basically, they are just very particular about where it's sourced from. So $80,800. So you're talking about 81 grand. This is a dressier, more high-end piece. So you got to keep that in mind when you're looking at this. The movement in it is the L.U.C 98-06-L movement. So it's a manual wind. The impressive part about this is that it's using a 4 or quad barrel technology, hence the name Quattro Spirit. So they're using 4 barrels in here to get you 192 hours of power reserve. So that's pretty crazy. When you think about even just a plain simple time only watch, I mean, most of them are going to have anywhere from 60 to maybe 80 of power reserve. So when you're talking about 192 hours, clearly they have done something really innovative with the barrel system and the way that the energy transfer happens to allow this power reserve to last for a really, really long time. So that's pretty neat. I'd say this is probably a little bit more on the innovative side, and even though it's not new, they've used this technology before. The watch design is what's new. So again, 4-barrel technology. You do have a jumping hour on here, so it took me a second to catch that with this watch. So if you don't like that style where you just have a jumping hour and then a minute's hand, this watch may not be for you, but it's an interesting design, and this is where I want to actually talk about what I liked about it. So when you look at this, you kind of think to yourself, okay, how did they, like, what is the dial, what's happening there? Like, what did they do for that? Is this some sort of elaborate guilloche? Like, what did they do? This is actually rye straw that is grown in the Burgundy region of France. How crazy is that? And they do have also some different color schemes on it. So they have a gold one, which looks really good and definitely kind of plays the part of looking like that traditional yellow gold dress watch. But they do also have some other colors too. They have kind of almost like an olive color. They've got like a black and gray looking one. They have a green, which is pretty vibrant as far as what I can see because they dye this straw, which is nuts. And then they also have a deep blue one, which is lovely as well. So they do have some different options here as far as which one you can go for. But as far as the dial goes, I thought that was kind of the most interesting part of what they did here. It's literal straw on the dial. It's not some rendering. It's not like it's actually straw. Pretty cool. And it has a very, very symmetrical and neat looking kind of cross-hatched looking pattern that I think is very unique. So that's what kind of drew me to this one, even though it is, again, a little more expensive, a little more high-end. So you just have to be ready for that. It's going to cost you a few dollars. It is an 8-piece limited edition. So again, just be aware of that. You have to get on the list quickly, I think, if you want to actually get one of these. But it was a neat release from Chopard. So that's that one. Okay, let's keep going. We're talking now about Zenith. And they had, I thought about including the Chronomaster Sport in this because I did kind of like the sapphire smoked dial, but I didn't end up doing that because it's just too similar to me still to like Rolex Daytona. I know that Zenith has brought its own DNA into it with the high beat chronograph movement and the El Primero, so I appreciate that, but I want to focus more on the GFJ models, which are Georges Favre-Jacot, who was the founder of Zenith. And what they did was this kind of started with the 160th anniversary editions. I think it was last year was the first year that they actually released this type of a model. But what they did with it was this kind of harkened back to an old caliber that they used to have in the watch, caliber 135. And instead of just reviving it, they basically rebuilt it from the ground up. So that's kind of a technological innovation when they first created this model and redid the movement. But that's not what we're talking about this year because we're highlighting 2026 releases. So this year, we've got 2 variants of this that are actually, I think, equally interesting. So the first one is a 39 millimeter case and it's yellow gold, which I guess when you think Zenith, you don't necessarily think yellow gold, but this is a cool looking piece. So if you like yellow gold, this is an interesting piece for you to take a look at, because what they use for the dial here is Bloodstone. So it's an actual stone. So in that sense, you're going to get a piece unique here, because every stone has a little bit of a different materialization and texturization to the actual stone itself. So it's kind of interesting. And then the other one that they did was a tantalum case, which to me is very intriguing, with an onyx dial. So this one is all black, and then they did diamond baguettes as the hour markers on this one. So both of these, again, equally interesting, I think, from Zenith. The lapis lazuli one from last year was also pretty cool, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea, even though I love blue. I actually think these two this year are more interesting just because of the different stones and the different kind of configurations that they use. So this watch, 10.5 millimeters thick, so relatively thin, pretty nice dress watch type of size. You've got the caliber 135, like I mentioned, so it's a manual wind, 72-hour power reserve. On these watches, there's a small seconds register, so rather than a central seconds, you have a small seconds down at 6. And then it is 2.5 hertz is the beat rate, 50 meters of water resistance, so just your typical kind of dress watch rating there. And then one of the other interesting things about this is the price point. So the price point on these watches is $50K, which is not insane for what you're getting in here. So I think this is actually a reasonable price point. However, what you can also do is these watches come on straps. That's how they're sold. You can also request an optional bracelet that would be made to order that basically is going to like double the cost of the watch. So just think about that for a second. You're spending like 50 grand on a watch with, some unique dial of stone or some sort of stone or, material. And then you can also buy a bracelet that's just about as expensive as the actual watch. And then you're going to get, for the yellow gold, obviously it's going to be yellow gold. For the tantalum, I believe what I read was this one is going to be in platinum, because manufacturing a full tantalum bracelet would be insane and hard to do. So that's why they're going to use platinum if you request the bracelet for this one. So if you love Zenith, if you're really considering what you could do here to make your year with a watch, the GFJ models could be a place to look. And like I say, they do have an interesting configuration with the two different case materials and dial materials. So worth taking a look at. Let's move on. We're going to go to our next watch here. And this brand, I don't think I ever talk about really, because I have seen some of their models. There's not much that is interesting to me. So that's why I don't really talk about it. That's the benefit of this channel, is I get to talk about the things that I think are interesting. So this time around, I do want to talk about the Piaget Polo 79 in Sodalite. So this is kind of an interesting piece, not something that I would typically go for, but the design on this is kind of striking. And they have done some watches like this in their other Polo 79 models. So they've released like a all white gold watch with an all white gold dial. They've released a yellow gold with a yellow gold dial. They've done some two-tone. So they just have this really interesting horizontal striations that they use through the actual case and bracelet. So a very integrated look. There's no doubt about that. But then this year, they actually took the white gold version of this and they applied Sodalite to the dial. Now, Sodalite is basically like a material type of stone that you get these unique textures and patterns in, almost kind of like we were talking about with Zenith with the Bloodstone. So they have a blue version of that on the white gold version of this watch, and I actually really like the color combo. Personally, I think this would just be wild, and I don't know that I would ever wear it, but if you like this type of watch, it's actually a pretty cool looking watch. It's 38 millimeters, 18 karat white gold case. Again, a blue Sodalite dial, only 7.5 millimeters thick. So this is a really, really thin watch. So probably would serve several different wearing cases within a collection. It's the 1200 P1 movement from Piaget. It's a micro rotor automatic, which does look very beautiful if you've never seen it. It's got a 44-hour power reserve, and then 50 meters of water resistance. So definitely not my usual type of watch here, but I do think the ultra thin aspect of it is cool, and the design elements are definitely unique. I mean, they're literally having to cut a sodalite, piece of stone essentially, to make it fit within those striations that are on the dial. Kind of a neat detail, for sure. Something that they probably spend a lot of hand crafting time to get to look the way that it needs to look to make this watch work. So it is a high price point. You're talking about $90K roughly. So just be ready for a high ticket price on something like this. And that's what I have to say about Piaget, which is, again, a new kind of feature for me on this show. Next, we're going to talk about Czapek. Czapek had a really cool release this year. They did have some other neat ones too. They had a tourbillon. They had a few that I've seen Czapek from a distance. I've never really looked super closely at Czapek, but they do make some really interesting dials in particular. So this year I did see one that I thought was absolutely beautiful, and I wanted to understand how they did it, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. So this one is the Promenade Midnight Pearl from Czapek, and it's a 38.5 millimeter case, and what they do is it's a combination of aventurine and mother of pearl. So I'm going to talk about how they achieve this in a second. The caliber that Czapek uses on these watches is the SXH5. They've used this caliber before, not foreign to them. It is a micro rotor automatic once again with a 60-hour power reserve, beating at 4 hertz and having 50 meters of water resistance. So your standard kind of dress caliber here. The finishing and the architecture on the movement is absolutely beautiful. They have these lovely skeletonized finger bridges that essentially go all along the left side of the movement, and that is what holds the gear train in it. So just really, really cool look here. And then even better, it's an automatic because you have a micro rotor automatic. So just a really neat look to the movement. I would highly recommend taking a look at them because they're really neat. And that's not what we're talking about on this watch even. So we're turning around and looking at the dial, because I saw some videos of this watch, and it's probably one of the best looking aventurine dials that I have seen because of what they do with it. So basically what they did is they took Tahitian mother of pearl on the dial. That's like 2 millimeters thick. So I mean, this is incredibly thin mother of pearl. Then what they do is they layer it with aventurine that's about equally as thick. And because it has a transparent quality to it, you can still see the mother of pearl through the aventurine. But then as you get with aventurine is these little small particles of metal, copper, cobalt, that are in the aventurine itself. You see through it. So you see the mother of pearl filtered through this crazy aventurine glass, and you just get this amazing combination of sheer beauty on the dial. I love my Girard-Perregaux 1966 Orion and the aventurine dial that they did, but this is like next level cool. So if you like really interesting dials, especially if you like blue and you like aventurine, of course, this would be an awesome piece to pick up. Now, from what I have seen, is it was a 38-piece limited edition. I believe it's all sold out at this point, so not sure if they're going to have more, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but it is a spectacular looking watch, and the way that they did, even the hands and the indices on the watch, just create this almost skeletonized effect to them, where the emphasis and the focus is solely on the dial and what's there. And they do have a small seconds down at 4:30, so you also have that just as a neat little piece of theater and movement on the dial, because I do appreciate that. I've talked about that before. I do like having some action on the dial just so it's not completely kind of dead. So I like that they have a small seconds on this dial because it is a phenomenal dial. So that's what I liked this year from Czapek in particular. Now let's move on. We've got one more watch that I want to talk about, and this one is, again, another watch that I don't feature prominently on this show because, quite frankly, some of the pieces and the overall brand many times feels a little bit frumpy to me. That's just my personal opinion. But we got to talk about Patek Phillipe for a second, because they do have a really neat looking watch that they released this year. And that is the Patek Phillipe Grand Complications 7047G-001. And this is a minute repeater packed inside their Calatrava case. They've done other styles of this watch in the past with some different color schemes that actually I kind of liked in a couple instances, but this one was particularly catchy to me. So this thing is just absolutely insane. So just be ready for a ridiculously priced watch. We'll talk about it, and then we'll move on. So we've got we've got a 38 millimeter white gold case that's 10.25 millimeters thick. So this is, again, your kind of typical Calatrava case. And I do like, the thing that I like about this watch is it does have a very modern look to it. Now this watch has a really neat looking navy blue embossed center dial with like some, almost like a crosshatch type of guilloche pattern on it. So I do like that detail. Then on the back of the watch you have the R27PS movement, which is another micro rotor automatic. So I do really like that about it. It's very attractive looking movement. And even if you look at it, I do appreciate that they made some symmetry on the dial back. So you've got the micro rotor at the bottom that's significantly larger, and then at the top at 12, basically you have the governing wheel for the minute repeater. And that's pretty cool. And then the strikers are kind of at the, I guess it would be on the back side. It would be like 11 o'clock, 10, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there. Just a really interesting piece. 48-hour power reserve, 3 hertz beat rate. There is 0 water resistance for this watch, so don't even think about having it on, when you're washing your hands or doing dishes or any of that stuff. You do not want to get water around this watch, especially because it comes in at a whopping 527 grand. So be ready with your checkbook on this one. It is not a cheap watch. I assume that there will probably not be a lot of them made, but if you can get your hands on one and you've got the budget for it and the wallet for it, I think it is a great looking piece from an aesthetic standpoint, and Patek minute repeaters are fantastic. They're among the best out there, so you cannot, again, argue with the prowess that they do have in that space. So I got to give credit where credit is due to Patek Philippe with this. That's what I have for round 2 on Watches and Wonders. So I do appreciate you taking the time to stop by, and I would be curious, which of these pieces do you think stands out among the, again, I'm calling them the just outside the spotlight releases? I would be curious. So leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this podcast, definitely do check out last week's episode where I talked about those Watches and Wonders releases that were, to me, the most innovative, that brought something new to the table. We talked about brands like JLC. We did talk about Vacheron again, and a couple others. So definitely take a look at that video. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.